Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This episode is going to blow you away if you're looking at investing into short-term rentals. I'm joined by the wonderful Erica Muller from Vrolio, who explains to us all the different bits and pieces that you need to know if you are going to pick up an investment property in short-term rentals. Erica is another legend that I met in VRMA. She knows an awful lot about the industry. She knows a lot about investing and setting yourself up for success. So she's one of those people that you really want to follow. Make sure that you give us a like and a subscribe, and make sure you watch it all the way through to get huge tips and huge value. Thanks so much, Erica, for coming onto the show, and let's get straight into it. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. I'm excited because today I am joined by the wonderful Erica Muller from Vrolio. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Bart. Thanks for having me.
Erica is an absolute legend. We met in Las Vegas. We've been talking the year before. This has took us, I think, over a year and a half for us to finally get together and to have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I mean, I always love learning from you. I'm a forever student, and every time we chat, I always learn something new. So I'm excited to be here today.
That's very kind. Look, and I'm really looking forward to you sharing with the audience what you get up to in your world, in your space. But let's start off with that. How about you introduce yourself, let everybody know who you are, where you're from, and what you do in your business.
Yeah, so my name's Erica Muller. I'm currently in Central Florida. I've been here for about 15 years. Prior to that, I was living in South Florida my whole life, and got into real estate 21 years ago. So I come from the real estate investment background. And I am one of those people that gets to say I survived the 2008 collapse, which short-term rentals actually saved my life during that time. That's actually how I got into short-term rentals. When the whole economy was collapsing, I was a real estate agent, and I actually had to leave South Florida, come to Orlando to actually survive the market because it was getting so bad. And there was no business in residential real estate at all. Right. So residential real estate agents were losing their homes. They had no income. I actually stumbled upon short-term rentals because Orlando happened to be the hub for this. And all the international tourists were still coming here. And because, the economic collapse was pretty much centralized around our country. So, internationally, there was still money to be made. I didn't realize that until I took a job at a short-term rental management company to survive. And my job was literally called the short-term rental liaison, where I was supposed to talk to international guests that were staying in short-term rentals about if they'd ever consider buying one, and then turn them over to the real estate agents, right? And that's how I discovered that there was millions and millions of dollars in money flowing into this country into short-term rentals, and this was before Airbnb. So that's when I jumped ship immediately and started selling short-term rentals in 2008. So that's how, or it was actually 2007, and that's how I got started in short-term rentals. My background prior to that was selling investment properties, commercial properties, and I usually worked with high net worth investors that were buying multifamily, gas stations, things like that. So I had a background already in investments. So it was a really great segue into probably the coolest niche in real estate.
Yeah, right. And that's fascinating. I always find it interesting if I talk to sort of mum and dad investors right now, and if we're talking about property, typically in their mind, they'll always be thinking residential real estate. And this whole, people still call it Airbnb investing, right? Or just Airbnb. Oh, you do Airbnb rather than short-term rentals. And that shift is still happening right now. It's not obvious to most people, I would argue, that to understand that short-term rentals is an investment class of its own.
Yeah, it's been recognized as its own asset class. The real estate industry is really slow to pick up on that. We still need more regulations around how appraisals are done based on short-term rentals, like how they're appraised, the income approach versus the residential approach. We're really working on trying to push that through because they really are businesses essentially. And so when you're buying and selling them, you're essentially buying a business and selling a business. So, because it is its own asset class, there's a lot that needs to happen, but it's come a long way since I started selling short-term rentals. Like I said, back in 2007, we actually called them vacation rentals at the time. But then since, Airbnb hit the scene, people started, a few years ago calling them Airbnbs, which I hated, and I still hate that when someone calls it an Airbnb. And now it's kind of evolved into just calling it a short-term rental, because it encompasses so many things, right? So I've loved watching this evolution.
Yeah, that's interesting as well. The vacation rental thing, I find more so that term is in the US rather than here. Here, I think that where we kind of almost skipped that part of it and we went to straight to short-term rentals, or it was kind of Airbnbs then short-term rentals, so people are adjusting. So pretty fascinating. So today, Erica, we're going to try to get as much value as we can out of you and your business and what you're up to, and we're going to be talking about acquiring another short-term rental investment, or if you've never bought one before, what it is that you need to think about. And the reason why I wanted to do this episode is because I think that it can create huge value if you are going to approach your next investment. You might think that you know everything, but this is going to be a refresher for you, and if you know nothing, it's going to help you get there. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah, awesome. So look, I think that there's sort of different parts of the strategy when you're picking up a short-term rental investment. And obviously you've got the acquisition part, you've got your research part and all of that, and then you've got the exit part of it, which a lot of people may not think about. Where would you like to start, and is there anything in between that I'm missing in terms of the conversation?
No, I mean, really, we're just down to basics when it comes to real estate investing. And, real estate investing is just real estate investing 101, no matter how you do it, no matter what you're buying. There's some basics that you have to understand before you start layering on the short-term rental stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And the basics of real estate investing is just really understanding, like, what is the return you're looking for? Is it a lifestyle return? Are you just trying to find something that pays for itself and have this equity play down the road? Are you really trying to replace an income? If that's the case, that's a totally different approach to it, because a lot of people will come to us and are like, look, we have 2 incomes to replace so that we can retire in 5 years. That's a whole strategy, right? Or is it you already own real estate and you're trying to diversify into a different asset class? You already know what cap rate you need to be buying at. So, there's a lot of different reasons going into it, but we really need to identify like why you're buying first and how much you understand of the basics on real estate. A lot of the basics are knowing the difference between a cap rate, a cash on cash return, and a gross ROI and why they matter, right? If someone doesn't understand those 3 metrics, it's going to be really, really easy to get sucked into the info vortex online of all the gurus and coaches that exist out there that are all selling something to you that I would say 90% of it you really don't need. You could learn it for free online, and the other 10% you can probably get from a really good real estate agent, right? So if you don't know what you don't know, that's the first problem with real estate investing. So I would say we start there.
I love you, Erica. You're so brutal. It's great.
It's the truth.
But it's about being honest. And I think, folks, it's important that you know that following advice from someone like ourselves, you've got to do your research. You've got to hunt around. And there's plentiful information out there. You can really find out a lot. But following one person in general is something that I advise against. Even if you're listening to me, following me, or Erica, listen to some other people as well and get a mixed bag of opinions. But I want to go back to those 3 elements that you kind of peppered there. And can you explain the 3? I don't know if we can do it briefly, but if you can explain them so that people have a starting point to then go and do more research.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to just talk about these 3 metrics real quick that matter. So you're going to hear a lot of people talk about the gross ROI, right? And the gross ROI is your top line metric. I hate this metric and I think it's garbage and I throw it in the trash can, but I'm going to tell you why I'm talking about it right now. The reason people are using it is because they don't have a better metric and they don't have better information for you. So you're going to hear people throw out gross this, gross that. Gross to me is literally nothing. It just means the total amount of money a property can bring in, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what you're going to put in your pocket. What you put in your pocket is a totally different metric, and that's what we want to focus on, right? And how you get to that next metric of what you put in your pocket is really the difference between a good operating home and a bad operating home, a good strategy going into the investment and a bad strategy going into the investment. So we've got our gross ROI, and basically this is the return on the total amount of money it's making.
Yeah.
That's the first one.
That makes sense. So wait, so the total amount of money it's making, so without any expenses, or are we taking expenses out of that?
No, this is without taking expenses out. You'd be
So no interest rate on the mortgage,
nothing,
no cleaning fees, just gross
top line.
Gross, but it's not return on investment. It's that's gross revenue, right?
Well, it's gross ROI. That's the metric that everyone's throwing out now. And actually, we never even accounted for that because it was such an irrelevant number. But we saw so many people in the industry starting to push this number, basically because of a lot of the data sites that are out there don't have expense ratios. They don't have better numbers. So the best they can do is come up with this gross formula. So I want you to be very cautious as a new investor about doing any kind of investment based on when someone says gross numbers, like gross revenue or gross ROI. It really, at the end of the day, it means nothing. The only reason you need the gross revenue is to get to the net revenue, right?
Yeah.
If someone says gross ROI, like there's no reason for that. Like, why would you measure a return on money that you're never going to see? So that's the first thing I would say. Like, we need to know what's going on with that metric, because I've seen it so much in the last 2 years. The second metric, which is what you should care about, is the cap rate. A lot of people think cap rate is an old school real estate metric. It is absolutely not. This is like as basic as, math, like 1 + 1 = 2. It's never going to go away. A cap rate measures the actual net return before their mortgage, but it's the net return of a house against every other house. So the way you would compare one investment to another to know if it's a good investment is a cap rate. You can't use a cash on cash return, which is the third metric, to compare like properties across a market, because that third metric, cash on cash return, only measures your personal return based on what you're investing out of your pocket, right? So the cap rate metric is the sole metric that you can use against any house in Australia, to compare it with a house in the US, to compare a condo against a townhouse, against a single family house. When you want to just see like what's producing the best overall return, your cap rate metric is going to be the one, right? So the number that you have that you're left with on the cap rate metric is your net income. Okay? That does not consider your mortgage, because the mortgage scenario is different for every single person. So from an investment standpoint, if you're measuring the return on something, it has nothing to do with your own personal financial investment into it. It just has to do with, like, does this house in Florida, how does this one compare to this one in Tennessee right now? That's what I want to know. It's the cap rate. So that's what you're going to use your cap rate for. Okay? Yeah. Then what you'll want to know is from that net number that's left after, you know your cap rate, you have your net operating income, your NOI. Can you pay your mortgage out of that and still profit? That's really what it comes down to. Is what's left, can I pay my mortgage? Can I still profit? And that's when we get into the cash on cash return ROI, or the cash on cash return metric, right? The cash on cash return metric is measuring the return on only my money out of my pocket. So if I'm buying this house for $500,000, $500,000, and I'm putting 20% down on it, I'm putting $100,000 on it, and I'm assuming it needs no work. I'm just assuming it's just the down payment, closing costs, $100,000 all in, right? My return on that investment is going to be on what I put into it, not what I borrowed, but what I put into it is going to be measured on cash return. So if you want to know what investment is going to be the best for you personally, based on how much you're putting into it, then you're going to use the cash on cash return metric. Does that make sense, Bart?
100%.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So that all makes sense in terms of those metrics that you're looking at. And so I guess what you're trying to say is that we want to look at these metrics and have these in mind when we are going to make our first investment or our next investment into our next asset. Is that right? Yeah,
and you want to know how to get them, right? So you want to know how you can find them. And there's all kinds of calculator tools out there you can use. There's free ones, there's paid ones. Happy to direct you to some, Bart, if you guys need suggestions. We have some. There's other ones out there, but as long as you...
Definitely in the show notes. If you can send me a link or two, then we'll put them in the show notes. And folks, you can download a calculator from Vrolio or whatever they send through.
Yeah, we have a free one you can use. But knowing that those are your metrics you need to be looking at, you want to know, okay, so if I'm comparing a couple houses in the same market or a different market, I'm comparing the cap rate on which one's going to perform better. And then when I understand which is going to perform better, then I want to start analyzing based on my own cash on cash basis. So those are the numbers you want to look for. Obviously, the higher the number, the better, which is the opposite of when you sell. Because when you sell, if we want to make money on the exit, we're going to sell at a lower cap rate, which is another reason why cap rate matters when you buy. And Bart, I won't go into too much on the exit strategy, but if you're buying in the beginning at too low of a cap rate, and there's not a lot of opportunity to increase the revenue, you're never going to be able to make money on the exit. It's just not going to happen. It's math, right? So the higher the cap rate when you buy, and the higher you can drive that cap rate to while you own it, and the lower you can sell it when you exit, is where all the money is made on the investment. So how you operate it, how high you buy at, those are the things that make the difference between a good investment and a bad investment. If you're investing and there's not a lot of opportunity to increase the revenue on this property, let's say it's you're buying a short-term rental that's already operating as a short-term rental, and it's really poorly managed, and you've got a really great management strategy. You're going to come in, you're going to reduce expenses, you're going to increase revenue, and that's going to drive your cap rate up, right? You're going to have a lot of upside when you sell, because let's say you bought it at a 7% cap rate. When you sell, okay, and then you increased and did the value adds when you owned it, you got it up to a 10% cap rate. And then when you sell, let's say you exit at a 5% cap rate. That difference between the 10 and the 5 that you sold at is your profit in actual, it actually calculates into a dollar amount based on an income valuation, right? So that's why it's important to know when you buy it, am I buying this at a good cap rate, or am I buying too low with not any opportunity to do any value add to the property?
Yeah, gotcha. Well, there were so many different questions. So if we are looking to acquire our next property, are we better off trying to find something which is already established as a short-term rental, or are we buying something that was a residential and then trying to switch it?
I like always buying something that's already an existing short-term rental for a few reasons. One is a low-performing one that's doing really bad. Someone's willing to let go of. They just hate it. They want to let go, right? But you can see where they're making their mistakes. If you do the due diligence properly and you dig into their management strategy, you dig into how they're getting their bookings, how they're operating it, you can find the opportunities where things are being done really just poorly run, right? And you can come in, apply a better strategy, and get that revenue higher. The other reason I like buying operating ones, poorly operating ones, is because if you're taking a mortgage, you will have some income already to help pay that mortgage. So you don't want to be stuck with that ramp up time. It could take some short-term rentals as long as 3 to 6 months to get really ramped up and start generating that solid income that's going to pay all your expenses. Do you really want to be holding that for a long time? Especially with the way that the market is shifting right now, a lot of people don't want to be stuck holding things. So any kind of revenue is better than no revenue. That would be my personal advice to somebody who's just getting into this and doesn't have revenue coming in from other properties that can carry that mortgage right away.
Yeah, right. Okay, so so picking up something which is there already, and then we're trying to find the opportunities to improve it. So we're looking for listings that aren't optimized correctly. We're looking for unique selling points that they might not already have within their property. We're looking at revenue management strategies so that they can improve, the nightly rate.
And aesthetic too, or aesthetic value add, like coming in and taking something that just looks horrible inside, right? And committing to a certain budget and just making it look so much better, modernizing it. Maybe you can put an ADU in the back and add another piece of revenue in the backyard. There's opportunities like that. Is everything that you just said plus what I said. That's how you add value. In real estate, it's called value add opportunity. Right? It's literally what it's called. And it's just buying underperforming properties and doing the value add opportunities and getting that cap rate and that revenue up.
And how do you calculate that? How do you calculate what you think, where it is and where you think it might go?
Yeah, so I mean, you obviously have to know and look into all of the paperwork and documentation that you're getting to see where the revenue really is. Usually people tell you it's making more than it is. So right off the bat, I would tell you if someone said, oh, it's bringing in 30 grand gross a year, there's the gross again. Remember, that's before expenses. I would take off 20% of that, subtract 20% automatically, and expect to find it making 20% less, right? But you're going to have to verify that from all the income that's coming in, seeing the money going into the account, looking for hidden expenses in their bank statements that might have been disguised through credit card payments. And then you need to get those statements and find out what those are actually being paid on. There's a lot of ways that people can disguise their expenses when they're selling, and it can look like it's actually making more than it is. So first you want to really identify what it's making to begin with. But understanding the market you're buying in and what is the demand in that market and for what kind of property, right? So if you're in a ski market and you're looking at an underperforming condo that needs work, like, is this condo you're buying even going to have the ability to perform at a higher level? And this is where you need data based on what kind of condo it is. Like, or is it just the condos that are ski in, ski out, or in a specific location within this community that are really the ones that are making the money? So sometimes you could find an underperforming property, but based on the geographic location of it, within the community that it's in, or within a distance to an attraction, it's either too far or it just doesn't have the ability to even run in the race. Right? So a lot of this is doing your upfront geographical due diligence as well in that market that you're in, because you can change anything inside of it, but once you acquire that, you cannot pick it up and move it somewhere else. So that's one big thing I tell people is every market is so different when it comes to this. For an example, in Orlando, when I was selling short-term rentals here, there was a huge difference in revenue based on a house that had a south-facing pool and a house that did not have a south-facing pool. The homes that had south-facing pools were doing 20% more revenue than the ones that didn't, because people that were coming here demanded that in the features of the home. Like, that's what they wanted to book, and they were willing to pay a premium for it. Nobody would ever know that unless they had somebody that they were working with, like a good agent or a manager that knew these things. If I was that person buying the house that was an east-facing pool and I was paying the same price for it as somebody with a south-facing pool, I would be pissed afterwards if I found this out after, right? I could never change that. And so there's just things like that you have to be doing your upfront research on, especially when it comes to value. It's not just, oh, I can change the inside and make it pretty.
Yeah, got it. And then how do we, when we're looking at this data and we're trying to understand how a market's performing, and then we can also see that there's more competition that's coming into the short-term rental space, that overall demand is fluctuating and going down. Pricing is probably under pressure, like a negative pressure at the moment in many territories. What are you feeling for 2023 and these the next set of uncertain times, making sure that we don't buy something which looks good right now, but is potentially going to get into a lot of trouble very quickly?
I mean, so you have to remember, I'm that person who literally found a way to survive in the last horrible recession, and I didn't survive, I thrived, right? And so I believe in strategies to thrive in bad economies. You just need to know and be willing to pivot when you discover what that pivot needs to be, right? And so our strategy going into this shifting economy and what could happen in the future in 2023 is we know things are going to change. At this point, anybody denying that is just, in my opinion, living in another world. Things are going to change. And what we really think that change is going to look like is moving more towards these midterm strategies as a backup plan, because our data is showing us that in every single market, almost every single market, that the midterm strategy is outperforming the short-term strategy because of saturation, right? What we're seeing is college towns, football towns, sometimes destination towns where there's like specific employees that have to come in for a season and stay there, drives those midterm stays up. But there's all types of reasons. But we're seeing, like, if you're going into a short-term rental market where you can do well with a short-term rental and you're happy with the return, your cap rate that you're going to get on the short-term rental, but you can actually almost double it with a midterm strategy, why wouldn't you buy in that market? Because it's almost gonna protect you against anything happening to that short-term rental market, because then you can pivot to the midterm strategy. And so we've seen this, especially like in a couple towns in Indiana where there's colleges there, but they're not like big universities, but they're colleges. And there's a lot of people booking for like anywhere from 31 days to 3 months in these midterm stays, but they're paying almost double of what people are getting on short-term stays. And so you could have a short-term rental half the year and then the other half the year do midterm, and you're actually going to drive even more revenue. But if you're buying in a market where it's like only short-term rental exists, there's no demand for anything else, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into one specific strategy, and there's really no backup plan for that, right? Which is why we're leveraging data to identify those mid and longer term stay opportunities so that we always have a plan.
Yeah, great. Look, I think that's a massive, massive tidbit of advice for people, or something to look at when you are going and looking at your next opportunities. Is that where there's that saturation in the short-term stays, where everyone's got a very similar product which is coming out, or everyone's upgrading their properties and they all look cookie cutter. You look at opportunities where other people aren't looking at the moment, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. Is another thing we can look at too is not just that strategy, but also the saturation capacity of the bedroom sizes. So how we approach data is very different. We actually we break it down by first property type, which is single family, townhouse, condo. You never want to blend those together. And then after that, we break it down by bedroom size, and we look at, okay, which bedroom size of this property type has the least competition in this market? And does the occupancy and return on investment support an investment into that to be in the most non-competitive but most profitable type of investment in that market? You can't do that without data. It's impossible, right? So I feel like making data-driven decisions going into this new market are almost absolutely critical, and the kind of data you're using is just as critical.
Let's wrap up on data actually, and that's something we haven't discussed before we started recording. There's a myriad of different tools and different places where we can find data, and I know that you've got a bit of a vested interest with your own product, but I'd love you to sort of give people some ideas, because you've got AirDNA, you've got Transparent, you've got all these different tools that people can use to start on the data journey. What like for someone that is looking at their next opportunity, what's the best thing that they could do next in terms of data, and what kind of data is the best to look at, and do they need to make some good decisions?
Yeah, look, I'll be straightforward with you on this. The reason we got into data is because we couldn't rely on any other data platform, and we couldn't make actual investment advice to people confidently with using those other platforms. So we had to do it. It wasn't like we're trying to get into data to get rich or anything like that. It was a necessary component to actually making good investment decisions. And we at our team actually use our own data. And I'll tell you just how we approach it and what to look for. Me personally, the reason I create the data that we do is because the data that's out there is just dirty. There's a difference between bad and dirty. Dirty data means that you're just getting a bunch of information that's thrown in one bucket, and it's dumped on a map, and everything's blended together, and you're just going to get statistics and metrics and results based on all kinds of different things, right? We didn't even realize how dirty that was until we started cleaning it. We actually have to throw out 50% of that data that's on these other data sites, because it's not even usable data that falls into a clean data set that you can work with. So things like, you're getting data of properties that have not even performed yet. They're just listed on Airbnb with a number, and they've never actually had a booking. So we don't even know if that's a proven number. And that's being thrown into these data sets. You're getting data showing occupancy that is blended together with the owner stays and the guest stays. We don't even know if those properties would have been booked if the owner didn't stay there. So the owner stay should never be included in occupancy. You're getting data that's blending together a 2-bedroom condo with a 6-bedroom single-family house, all because it's under the same zip code. And that single-family house is bringing in $1,200 a night. That condo is bringing in $100, and then you're getting an average based on that. This is not how you approach data, right? So that's what people need to understand is what I'm looking at even reliable right now, and should I be using this? It's better to not use data at all than it is to use bad data, because it's really going to mislead you. And I'm not saying every data company that's not us is bad. What I'm saying is every data company that's not us doesn't clean it to the level we do, because we're super conservative. We're hyper conservative with data because we power loan decisions. We also power investment decisions. If you are looking at unclean data, which is basically what's out there, you need to approach it with some level of understanding that, hey, I need to shave off like 30% or 40% from this revenue estimate. And I need to understand that this is a gross number based on all kinds of different data sets thrown in here. If you can't make the numbers work at like half of what that's showing you, I wouldn't even use that as a baseline. Because that's really what it's coming down to, is you need to be doing your own filtering of what's good and what's bad anymore.
Yeah, very, very complicated, and you've brought up some very good points. I mean, quite often people, it's part of the research journey. You go and you look at your competitors and you check out what their pricing is and whether they're occupied or not, and what their forward booking's like. But like you said, you don't know whether the calendar's booked out because the owner's staying there, or whether someone's actually booked it. And then if someone did book it, what that rate actually was, how much did they actually pay, or was it just a pie in the sky dream that someone would spend $1,000 a night for this particular place, and then you're using that data. So you need to use the data in a way that makes sense, I guess, and to get it from different places and then put it together and go, okay, this is what I think the puzzle actually looks like. And that's why data is so valuable. And some of these companies that we're talking about have been bought out for huge numbers.
Which is shocking to me, though, because it's really not valuable what they're doing. Anybody can scrape data and put it on a map. That's not a hard thing to do. You could go on Upwork and hire somebody for $2,000 to scrape Airbnb and then put it in a bucket and then aggregate that onto a map. So I'm shocked at some of the acquisitions that have happened based on the type of data that have been acquired. Believe me, I never wanted to have to get into the data business. We just did it out of necessity. Like I said, I wish somebody would have done it better 2 years ago, because it's such a critical thing to be working with when you're making such a big decision, and I've seen so many people following coaches and different investment platforms that are trying to sell you and teach you concepts, and they don't even tell you that the concepts you're basing it on are teaching you how to work with data that's not accurate. And so what I'm seeing is there's going to be a lot of people holding real estate in 2 years from now that are not going to be able to cover those costs, especially when things start to shift. So there might be a lot of opportunities that come up for our strategy of buying these underperforming short-term rentals from those owners that just didn't have the right strategy going into it. So there's always opportunity.
Yeah. Look, my top tip for this sort of stuff is, you're going to spend 200, 300, 400, $1 million on a property. It's worthwhile spending an extra $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to talk to somebody who's done it before. Somebody that's bought 10 properties, 100 properties, someone that can say, hey, that's a dud for these reasons, or that looks like a great opportunity. Because you will save yourself tons of money in the long run. Yeah,
and there are good coaches out there. I want to say that, because Bart, I don't want you to think that I think they're all fluff. There are some good ones out there. We actually work with quite a few of them that send us their clients to help them acquire stuff. And we've seen some quality coaches, and we've also seen it in the other direction. So it's really just, like you said before, who are you plugging into? What are you learning? Is what you're learning actually going to help you? Where are you getting the data from? Where are they getting the data from? What are these strategies in every market? And then working with somebody local in every market is critical too, because what you can learn from a local real estate agent who actually lives in that market, no data can ever tell you those things. So part of what we do too is like pairing our data with a local real estate agent on the same call so that we can use that together as like a knowledge bomb. So like, here's what the data says. Like, good data should pose good questions to ask, not necessarily answers, but good data should drive you to questions you never knew you needed to ask, right? And then the people answering those questions should be the local experts that they can understand why the data says that. And when you pair those two things together, that's like kind of right there, your formula for complete success in a market. But leaving one or the other out, I wouldn't do that, going into an investment.
Yeah, beautiful. So look, my last comment is, it's fascinating how short-term rentals and Airbnb has been pitched as passive income. It kind of just happens. There's no work involved in any of this. And what's very clear is, if you're serious and you want to get into it, you've got to do your research. You've got to do the work. You've got to figure these things out. It's not as passive as you might think. and your skill set that you learn along the way is incredibly valuable, and that is your asset. But the whole passive income thing, I haven't seen many successful people just have it as passive income without absolutely destroying themselves working hard.
Yeah, it's not passive. I don't know why people say that it's passive. Like, it's passive if you don't want to make a lot of money from it. If you want to spend all your profit to other people to run it for you, and you want to just get whatever's left over, it's passive. But if you're going into it to make a profit, it's absolutely not hands off. Like, there's work involved, like you said, Bart. And honestly, like, I have no problem telling people sometimes, like, look, this is not going to work for you. You're going to be a terrible host because this is how you're viewing it and this is what you want out of it. There needs to be expectation management. But it is profitable if you don't mind getting your hands dirty a little bit. I've had investments. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that I think the people that are engaged in listening to these kind of podcasts and getting information, which is going to empower them to make the right decisions in the future, I think that's already half the battle that's won. Because it shows that you're not just expecting to follow one person or go, all right, I've got this information now, I'm just going to go for it. So educating yourself is a huge part of that puzzle, and I think that that's kind of half of the battle.
Absolutely. Everything. It's like that with anything though, Bart, right? Like, if we don't understand what questions to ask people, if we don't understand if we don't know what we don't know, then we're never going to understand where all our money is going, why we made a bad decision, and how to prevent those decisions. Like, I would never get into any kind of an investment without knowing and educating myself on all of the components, without knowing how to interview property managers correctly. You can interview them, but do you even know if you're asking them the right questions, right? Like, and if you're not even asking the right questions and you're just hearing feel-good responses, like, you're still not going to succeed. You're still going to get a bad property manager. There's so many pieces like that. Like you said, it's all education and learning, and being able to filter out what's fluff and like what's real, true information. And it doesn't always feel good. I tell people this all the time. I'm like, and this goes back to also data too. I'm like, you're not always going to like the data because the numbers aren't going to be what you thought they were. And that might bother you because you had this idea in your mind of what things were doing in a certain market and how they were being, how properties were performing. I'm here to just show you the real numbers. I'm not here to make you feel good, right? I'm here to help you not make a mistake. What you do with that information is up to you. And it's the same with any expert that's trying to help you. It's like, if they're a good expert and they know what they're doing, they're not here to make you feel good. They're here to give you the truth, and then you can choose to do what you want with it.
That's it. And on those words, we're going to wrap up the episode. Look, Erica, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know your schedule is incredibly busy, to have a chat with us, to share some of your insights, your thoughts, your knowledge. Folks, if you are tuned in on the podcast, then make sure you give us a like, a subscribe. Same thing on YouTube. It really makes a big difference to the channel. Enables us to keep on growing and doing what we do, which is trying to provide immense value to the accommodation community. Erica, thank you once again. I do appreciate you. I wish you an awesome rest of the day. Go and get some dinner, and we'll talk again soon.
You too, Bart. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Take care.